So first of all, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Mark DeLuca, Deputy Director of Public Works. I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight to be here. And welcome back to the Banneker Room. This is the first or second day that the county building has been open. And so tonight we're going to talk about the Ellicott City Safe and Sound update. So before we get into the weeds of the project, I want to introduce our county executive, Calvin Ball, to come up and say a few words.
Kind of a little treacherous back here with the wiring. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. Really appreciate your continued interest in the update of the Ellicott City Safe and Sound Plan. When I took office in December of 2018, developing a plan for Ellicott City that both protects our town and preserves its historic character was among my first priorities. Almost immediately, we introduced the Ellicott City Safe and Sound Plan, and our team continues to work diligently to move that plan forward. Over the last 2.5 years, we provided more than $33 million in county funding for projects in Ellicott City and secured more than $20 million in state funding. I want to give a special thank you to Senator Katie Fry-Hester, Delegate Courtney Watson, and our entire state delegation for their continued partnership in keeping our town safe. We also hope to receive another $75 million through the EPA's WIFIA program. Since announcing our plan, we've broken ground on the H7 pond, extended the North Tunnel to preserve several buildings on the west end slated for demolition, and completed preliminary design and submitted concept plans for H4 and NC3 approval. We've also continued to work through the complicated permitting and regulatory processes at the local, state, and federal level, all during a global pandemic, the likes of which we haven't seen in a century. Tonight, you will have an opportunity to speak directly with the incredibly talented team of individuals working on these projects. And you'll hear from them about the progress we've made and continue to make on these projects, as well as some of the challenges that we face. I encourage you to ask questions of them and to share the progress that we've made with your friends and neighbors. I would like to thank my team for their dedication and the hard work that they've continued to do on behalf of Ellicott City. I also want to thank each and every one of you for continuing to be engaged and part of the process. Ellicott City is about to celebrate her 250th anniversary. And working together, I'm looking forward to seeing the next 250. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ball. So the structure of tonight's meeting will start with a brief overview of the Safe and Sound Plan, including a funding plan, an update of the Safe and Sound projects, an update of projects that are associated with the Safe and Sound Plan, and then we'll end with questions and answers outside in the lobby where we'll have specific project stations set up. The project stations will be manned by our consulting teams and our county staff. Now tonight we have a hard stop at 7:30 this evening that we must hold to, but we're very interested in questions that you have or comments that you want to make about the projects. And so if you don't get a chance to ask your question or talk to someone today because the table may be crowded, then please email us at ecsafeandsound howardcountymd.gov. Now, that email address will show up at the end of the presentation. It will be up on the screen for you to take a look at. Okay. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is this exhibit on the flood mitigation funding overview. The exhibit breaks down the available funding by capital project and fiscal year. You can see that the approximate occurrences of the flood events are placed on here, and we have the 7/26 flood, the 5/2018 flood, excuse me, and then a transfer of money from, which is what a TAO is, a transfer of money from other appropriated funds in the county at the time were transferred into our projects. Now, the projects are listed, and if you can, see the bottom line, they're by fiscal year. They start in 2015 and go up to fiscal year 2022. You'll see the different projects we use, C0337, which is the primary project for Ellicott City. But in the very beginning, it started as D1165, which is a drainage project. And we had started to put some money into that to do projects around Ellicott City. And as time progressed, more money went into the C0337, which is the Ellicott City Fund, and the D1165 diminished until you get to FY 2020, and you can start to see a significant increase in the, because of the TAO, the significant increase in funding for C0337, and then again in FY 21, and significantly in FY 2022. This bar, the last bar here, really reflects all the money is going into C0337 as a funding source. And it shows WIFIA funding, a federal component, is about $75 million. County and state funding, approximately $15 million. The next slide is just a brief slide on WIFIA. We will have a table outside if you have any questions about how the financing works. But WIFIA, it's a $75 million loan from the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act of the Environmental Protection Agency. We currently have council authorization, so it's in our budget. And we have sent out a letter of intent to use the money to EPA, and we were told to submit an application for it. So this is a very good sign. And we'll be submitting our application this September. And this funding will be, the anticipated loan closing is, anticipated loan closing is September of '22. Now I'd like to talk about the Ellicott City Safe and Sound project specifically. And the first thing I'd like to do is just to kind of, as a review, just do an overview of where these projects are. So what you see here on this exhibit is the area in the dotted line. That's the Tiber Hudson watershed, and the major north-south road is US 29, and the east-west road is Route 40, the major east-west road. The blue line at the very right of the exhibit that runs north to south, well, that's the Patapsco River. Now, as far as project locations go, I'll start closest to the Patapsco River, and that's the Maryland Avenue culverts. And that'll help you acclimate yourself to where we are on the map, because Maryland Avenue culverts, that's where Main Street intersects the Patapsco River, goes across into Baltimore County. The next project just south of that is NC3. That stands for a flood mitigation project that's on the New Cut tributary, followed by T1 just to the north of it. That's a project, a flood mitigation project on the Tiber. Then further west, on the left-hand side of Route 29. That's H4. That's actually adjacent to Frederick Road. That's another pond, retention pond. North of that is H7, which is inside of the US 2940 interchange. And then now back to the east is Quaker Mill. That's off of Rogers Avenue. And then the red line you see is the extended north tunnel. And that initiates on the west end of Ellicott City and travels to the Patapsco River. Now, as far as project specifics go, just to update you on the extended north tunnel, the north tunnel is approximately a 15-foot diameter tunnel that will extend from the west end to the Patapsco River. We recently completed the feasibility of the extension of the north tunnel, and we selected a final design firm to take us to final design. We're currently finalizing the final design scope and fee, which we hope to have done, and with a final design starting in September of this year. And we currently released a solicitation for an owner's representative. And what an owner's representative will do is help the county, aid the county in reviewing the design documents and construction documents. They'll also provide quality control and quality assurance for the project as it moves forward. And we'll continue to engage CSX for feedback on our preliminary and final design for the North Tunnel. The next steps we have here is we'll be soliciting for a construction team using a construction manager at risk contract method. This is important to note because this method allows for the contractor to be involved very early in the design and inform the designers on the constructability, on any constructability issues and associated costs with it. The advantages to the county of this type of method of contracting will be a better design, also to highlight or minimize unexpected conditions that might pop up, and to formulate a guaranteed maximum price for the construction of the tunnel. We're really looking forward to the North Tunnel. It's an exciting project. We've never done anything like this in Howard County and many of the neighboring jurisdictions either. But we have a lot of qualified designers and contractors, and so we're looking forward to working with them. This is an alignment of the, this is the most likely alignment of the extended North Tunnel. And you can see it starts in the 8800 block of Frederick Road and goes all the way down to the Patapsco River on the right-hand side. The lightly shaded green part on the right-hand side was the previous North Tunnel that was in our design. And then the darker green represents the extended North Tunnel. And as mentioned before, this is what allows us to really limit the impacts to the community. It'll be underground the whole time. It varies in degree of how many feet below ground, but it's tens of feet to hundreds of feet below the ground. The next project is H7, and this project has secured funding where we've completed the bid process to bring the contractor on. We have the contractor on board, and we've issued a notice to proceed, and currently this project is under construction. So this is our first project under construction. We're very excited about this one. Quaker Mill is a 10-acre-foot dry flood mitigation pond located off of Rogers Avenue. And this is in final design. Recently, final design, acquisition, and construction documents are complete. We're currently awaiting regulatory approvals. It has to go back to, since we're getting state funding for this project, it has to, once we have the contract documents done, which we do, then we get on the Board of Public Works, the State Board of Public Works. We get on their agenda, goes before that group, which consists of the governor and a few others. They approve the project, and then the money is released and we can start construction. So our next steps here will be to get the bid package out for the contractor this August. We're going to take it to the Public Works Board, which is scheduled, and then we'll begin construction. We're expecting to begin construction in January of '22. Maryland Avenue Culverts is a culvert or a series of pipes that will be installed under Maryland Avenue connecting the Tiber Hudson to the Patapsco River. We recently received Historic Preservation Commission conditional approval and have secured the funding for this project. We are currently at approximately 90% design review complete and have engaged, CSX for their feedback on our designs. We will be issuing a solicitation for the construction team within the next month through a construction manager at risk contract, like I explained for the North Tunnel. And we anticipate we'll be bringing on that team in the early winter of 2022. We'll be completing the final design and permitting with construction beginning in late 2022. And that's contingent on CSX approvals. Next project is NC3, and this is a pond, a 63-acre dry flood mitigation pond located on the Autumn Branch in the New Cut watershed. And we've recently completed concept drawings for this, and those design concepts are currently under regulatory review. And when I say regulatory review, I just want to take the opportunity, because there are a lot of moving pieces and how many review agencies there are, and you know, the whole workflow for all of these. So the regulatory review it's in right now is once we get a concept together, then we send it over to the Maryland Department of the Environment, specifically the Dam Safety Division. They have it right now, they review it, they provide their feedback as to the suitability of the pond and what its hazard classification is going to be, and whether our design concepts are adequate or do they need to be supplemented with other things. We are engaging with the property owners, and for the next steps, we'll be moving with the approved concepts into a preliminary design and finalizing acquisitions. And we anticipate acquisition funding in July of 2022 and construction funding in July of 2023. The next project is H4, and this is a 15.5 acre-foot dry flood mitigation pond, and like I said before, it's right off of Frederick Road on the west side of 29. This project is fully funded with the help of our state delegation securing the funds for us. Similarly, we've recently completed concept designs, and the designs have been are currently under review with the regulatory agencies. The next steps here will be for us to move to approved design concept and then into preliminary design. And we estimate preliminary design will begin this September, and estimate construction may begin in early 2023. T1 is a 70-acre foot dry flood mitigation pond located on a Tiber tributary. And we're currently, we continue to analyze a potential delivery method for this project. It's a large pond, and so we're looking at different methods of contracting, and one of them is to consider a public-private partnership, and and as well as some others more traditional ways to design and construct this. So the funding is anticipated in July of 2022. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to call up Zach Hollenbeck and to talk about the associated projects on Main Street.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening, everybody. I'll go through some of the associated projects that we're working on, and so these are projects that will work in conjunction with some of the EC Safe and Sound projects that Mark mentioned earlier. So the first of those is the six building partial removal project, which I'm sure you all have seen under construction over the past year or so. And so the work that we completed recently on this was the removal of the rear portion of the Kaplan's building and stabilization of the Kaplan's building, which was in danger of collapse when the county acquired it, which you see the image of here. With the other remaining buildings, we've engaged a design team earlier this year to develop a code and use study that's analyzing how we can use these buildings either as individual buildings or collectively, and what are the building code implications of doing so that the county can determine how best to use them. Our next step in that process will be engaging the project advisory team that was announced earlier this year, which is a group of local and subject matter experts. We'll be reviewing that code and use study with them in the near future. We're also concurrently working to advance the schematic design for the rear removal of the remaining buildings that would be 8085, 95, and 8111, 8113. We're working through the Section 106 process, which I'll expand upon in just a little bit. So once we get through the schematic design process, we'll be seeking regulatory approval from the county's HPC, Historic Preservation Commission, and the Maryland Historic Trust in order to facilitate an early design package in the spring of 2022. With the 4 building removal effort, these are removing the 4 buildings between Maryland Avenue and Tiber Alley. Earlier this year, we received conditional approval from the county's Historic Preservation Commission for this removal effort. Where we completed the final design effort for these 4 buildings, which annotated components of the buildings that will be salvaged, character-defining elements that we'll be salvaging for future reuse in Ellicott City. We also completed a hazardous material assessment of the buildings. We're currently engaged with one of our on-call contractors looking at some pre-construction services for phasing and logistics around the site, as well as developing accurate bid package. And again, the Section 106, which I'll expand upon. So our next steps in this, at the conclusion of the Section 106, we'll seek MHT, Maryland Historic Trust, regulatory approval so that we can commence construction. And the conditional approval from the Historic Preservation Commission is conditioned on approval of the Maryland Avenue Culvert crossing from CSX. So we're continuing to engage CSX and work through that as part of the Maryland Avenue Culvert project. So the Section 106 process that I spoke to a couple moments ago, the Section 106 process is associated with identifying historic and cultural resources in the watershed and then working through mitigating any potential adverse effects on those resources. There are 4 projects that are associated with the Section 106 review, and that's the extended North Tunnel, the Maryland Avenue Culvert, the 4 building removal, and the 6 building partial removal that I mentioned. We recently completed an engagement process with our consulting parties on this and a second consulting party meeting, and we've completed a review of our draft programmatic agreement, which will guide the implementing actions that the county needs to take upon signature of that programmatic agreement. That'll be circulated for signature in the very near future, meaning that we've completed the Section 106 process. Now, while we've completed that process, that develops the programmatic agreement, as I mentioned, there's a number of things in there that we'll need to do before we begin implementing the projects and throughout the life cycle of the projects. So the Tiber Park expansion is the activated pedestrian area that we envision after removal of the 4 buildings, implementation of the Maryland Avenue Culvert, and the associated water conveyance. This area, the final treatment for this area is prescribed in the Ellicott City Watershed Master Plan. We've recently issued an expression of interest to solicit site and landscape design firms, not just for this project, but for the entire Ellicott City area. And that solicitation is available now, and so our next steps will be gathering responses to that solicitation and evaluating those, and then developing a specific scope and design fee so that we can proceed with the design of this. Our hope is, with the sequencing of these projects, that we work through and we develop a design so that we can begin construction and implementation of this project concurrent with the conclusion of the Maryland Avenue Culvert. We've also recently completed a sediment study to ascertain the potential accumulation of sediment within the Tiber-Hudson stream channel network. So in order to do that, we did a series of field investigations that included test pit excavations and use of some other equipment to determine the depth of sediment and the depth of rock within the stream channel. And we analyzed whether removing that material would be hydraulically beneficial. We looked at a primary area that was behind the back of Kaplan's proceeding down towards Tiber Park, and then we expanded that to 3 other areas. So what we found is that, while there is sediment in the stream channel, which I'm sure that nobody would be surprised to hear, the analysis shows that removal of that sediment alone will not result in a meaningful increase in the flow capacity of the conveyance network. And so there's a couple things that are worth noting there. One is that sediment during a storm event, that sediment is mobilized within the stream channel. So it is picked up by water and displaced and deposited in new and different areas. So even if we do remove it from one area, it may deposit itself in another area. And so these, as I mentioned earlier with the 6-building removal process, that project will remove the rear portion of the buildings, which are constrictions above the channel. That removal process will provide an appreciable increase in capacity of the channel. So I'd now like to introduce our team who's here tonight. I'm going to be stationed out in the lobby after this. They'll be more than happy to take any questions that you all may have and any comments that you have on the projects. If I can ask everyone to stand up as I read you so you can associate a face with a project. At our North Tunnel project from McMillan Jacobs Associates, which is our final design firm, we have Dave Corkum. Dave might already, there's Dave, excellent, and Mark DeLuca, who you met earlier tonight. For the Maryland Avenue Culvert, we have a station that Maryland Avenue Culvert and Sediment Station will be jointly located. We have Andy McLean with McCormick Taylor, who's the lead engineer, Brian Cleary from the Department of Public Works, Environmental Services, and myself, who you met earlier. For our buildings and Tiber Park Station, we're joined by Chelsea Dell from SGH, who is our structural engineering consultant, who's been integral in the preservation of Kaplan's, as well as some of our other flood-proofing strategies. We're joined by Sharon Walsh from the Bureau of Facilities, and Bob Lins from Rec and Parks. For Quaker Mill, at the Quaker Mill Station will be Mark Richmond from the Bureau of Environmental Services. The H7 and NC3 projects will be Greg Adolph from McCormick Taylor and Avinash Dewani from the Department of Public Works Environmental Services. For those of you who might be interested in learning more about the WIFIA process, we're joined by Zach Carson from Rebel, which is one of the county's financial advisors, as well as Rafu Aguile and John Vu from the Department of Finance. And then last but not least, the H4 and T1 projects, Ryan Thomas with Century Engineering, Michelle Monti from the Department of Public Works Environmental Services. So as Mark mentioned earlier, we're here till 7:30 tonight. We welcome any comments, questions that you have at the stations. If you'd like to send additional comments or questions after you get home tonight, please feel free to send them to ecsafe&sound@howardcountymd.gov, and we will follow up with you. Thank you all for coming tonight, and we look forward to speaking with you at the stations.